It's been a while since I have made the Choose Your Main series, and lots of things changed since then. So I thought it was time to create a new series for the most recent version of the game. The goal of the series is to give you full details related to builds, playstyle, and leveling for each class, so you can make an informed decision if you should start or switch to that specific class. This video will be focused on Guardian and all the specs that it has, and we will start with the core class. Guardian is a heavy armor class, but has the lowest HP pool compared to Warrior and Revenant. But what it lacks for in HP makes up in utility skills with plenty of defenses. The leveling experience is good, and you'll have plenty of weapons to choose from. As for power versus Condi, Guardian works best with power DPS when leveling. Or you can go with Celestial gear since you have lots of burning built into the class. And speaking about leveling, some notable skills to take early on are Shouts, which gives lots of boons, Signets, specifically Signet of Judgment and Bane Signet, and from the spirit weapons category, the Sword. As for using the class at level 80, let's just say that all elite specs will do more damage and have more utility. But if you do not have any expansions, you can definitely use it in open world content, dungeons, and low level fractals. As for playstyle, the Guardian's class mechanics are the virtues, which gives you a passive effect while they are active and can be triggered to give you and your allies an increased effect for a period of time after pressing them. So you have Virtue of Justice for offensive, Virtue of Resolve for heal and support, and Virtue of Courage for defense. And if you want a build that I used for open world, you can see it on the screen now. The gear paired with this build was full Berserker, which means it has power, precision, and ferocity stats. And this pretty much covers the core Guardian. Let's move on to the first elite spec, Dragonhunter. This spec is focused solely on DPS, and power DPS to be more specific, as you do not have any traits that benefit Condi damage. But it is a good DPS build, it was constantly buffed and it can handle any content. It can be a bit squishy in open world, but if you take some defensive utility skills, it can help mitigate that. The playstyle for Dragonhunter is a bit different compared to the core class, as it feels more dynamic. The virtue skills are also changed and improved. You will now have Spear of Justice instead of Virtue of Justice, which is a ranged skill and it tethers you to an enemy, and also increases your damage if you have the Big Game Hunter trait. The second virtue is changed to Wings of Resolve, which is a movement skill and heals yourself and allies where you land. And the third virtue is changed to Shield of Courage, which creates a shield in front of you and gives Aegis. Another thing that is different to the core class is that now you have access to the longbow, which works great with the Dragonhunter and it also gives it some ranged AoE damage. I know Scepter is ranged too, but it doesn't bring the same DPS. And another thing that you gain access to with Dragonhunter are traps. They have tons of damage, but you need to use them on bosses that do not move. As you can see in the video running in the background, I prefer to use the same utility skills as I use on my Willbender, but that is because I got used to them like that. If you plan to main Dragonhunter, I recommend to change Signet of Judgment to Procession of Blades, and switch the elite to Dragon's Maw. It will significantly increase your DPS. As for the build used in the video, you can see it on the screen now. Okay, time for the second elite spec for Guardian. Firebrand, the best support spec that the game had for a long period of time. Lately it has a lot of competition in the support department, but it's still one of the best. Let's talk about the builds, as this spec has a great variety. You can play Firebrand as a full Condi DPS spec, which was recently buffed. And you can do some nice damage if you have Secrets of the Obscure, as it works great with the pistols. You can also play as a support quickness DPS, which again is very good, but it will do even more damage with the pistol, so again, Soto is nice to have. You also have the support heal quickness, which works very well in many encounters. It doesn't have as much healing output as the other specs, but it has lots of utility like Aegis and stability. And if none of these builds are of interest to you, there is also the hybrid support with Celestial gear. And it works the same as the name suggests. You do some damage, but you can also heal and provide quickness. And this works in many encounters, but not all of them. Now for the playstyle and class mechanic, with Firebrand we gain access to tomes instead of virtues. And we have a tome for each type of virtue. For the first one we have Tome of Justice, which gives you access to 5 offensive skills that use pages as a resource. You can see the blue lights next to the tomes. Each light indicates a page and each skill has a different number of pages required to be cast. And this applies to all 3 tomes. Now, for the Tome of Resolve, you have 5 skills focused on healing or condition cleansing. And the last tome is Tome of Courage, which gives you access to 5 skills focused on defense and utility. Also, in addition to all these skills, tomes have an effect when triggered too, so they are really powerful. As for the weapon, Firebrand gains access to Main Hand Axe, which works very good as a support and DPS weapon. And it also works well with the piston main hand and offhand if you have Secrets of the Obscure. As for the builds mentioned, there are quite a few to show them in the video, so I will add them in the description of the video. And the last elite spec to be added to Guardian is Willbender. And it is actually my favorite because of how the combat feels compared to Firebrand and Dragonhunter. If you like fast-paced combat, then you will like this spec too, but it's not the only reason that I like the spec. The build variety is very good and it can cover all roles: DPS, support DPS and heal support. You have power builds and condi builds for DPS, and then the same applies for support builds. You have power and condi alike DPS, which have a big range in which you can share the alacrity and makes it a nice spec to play as a support, since you do not have to worry too much about positioning. The only downside would be the forced movement, as the F2 skill doesn't stop when you hit a boss or an enemy, or if you are on a ledge, like Harvest Temple, you can fall. And the last support build is the heal alacrity, which is decent. It doesn't have as much utility as Firebrand, and the heal output is on the lower side, but it will work for the majority of encounters. Now let's move on to the spec mechanics. Same as with Dragonhunter and Firebrand, Willbender also gets different functionality with virtues. You have Rushing Justice, which is a movement skill and increases your damage, so you should use it as soon as it is off cooldown. Next is Flowing Resolve, which heals you for every hit that you do when it is activated, but it can also generate alacrity depending on the traits that you use. And for the healing build, this skill will only generate alacrity and will no longer heal you. And the last one is Crashing Courage, which will give you defensive buffs. The good thing about Willbender is that now you can activate all 3 and all 3 effects will stack. When this class was added, the effects would not overlap and it will override each other, making Willbender bad to use as a support role. And now, moving on to weapons, Willbender gets access to Offhand Sword, which is actually a power DPS weapon, and that power build is not as competitive as the condi version. You can still use it in open world as it feels very nice to use with all the hits and shadow steps, but the condi versions for Willbender are more powerful due to the pistol being added with Secrets of the Obscure. So I would suggest you use that. And in regards to the builds, I will put some links in the description, as Willbender has even more than Firebrand now for PvE content. In conclusion, Guardian is a great class and a good choice if you decide to pick it up as your main, with lots of useful specs and good builds for each one. As you can see on my Guardian, I have 5 equipment templates and 6 build templates to cover all the roles. Also, with Secrets of the Obscure, I have added pistols to my Firebrand and Willbender builds, and what a difference does that make. I actually played more Willbender since the new weapons dropped than on my Ranger. Also, for open world, you have plenty of options to choose from. Even if you do not have any expansion, Guardian is still a great choice. If you want to see more content like this, please let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed the video, please click the like and subscribe buttons.